What if the world's quietest nation turned the global economy on its head, without firing a single shot? While all eyes were on China, it was Canada that made the decisive move. In less than 24 hours, chaos engulfed the North American auto industry. Tesla's crucial support? Severed. Ford's production lines? Slowed. The American vision of clean energy and economic resurgence? Derailed by a nation once considered an ally. This isn't just a news headline, it's a blueprint for collapse. And it all started with one signature in Ottawa. How did Tesla become the first casualty? Why is Japan now assembling America's cars? And what if this isn't merely a trade dispute, but the unraveling of U.S. industrial dominance? At its core, Tesla has always balanced on the edge of brilliance and instability. Its success depended not only on innovation, but on precise logistics, parts arriving on time, materials sourced globally, and operations running like clockwork. But now that clock has shattered. Within 72 hours of Canada's mineral restrictions, Tesla's gigafactories in Nevada and Texas felt the impact. These facilities, designed for massive battery production, suddenly faced supply uncertainty. Nickel shipments from Canadian mines were halted for compliance checks. Lithium exports slowed due to new inspections. Meanwhile, Canadian regulatory shifts led to delays and increased costs at aluminum smelters, Tesla's partners. Whether these restrictions were temporary didn't matter. Tesla's business model wasn't built to adapt to sudden disruptions. Suppliers raised prices overnight, and Tesla's internal teams scrambled globally for alternative sources, even reconsidering China, a country they had sought to reduce dependence on over the past 5 years. But restructuring supply chains isn't simple. They're complex ecosystems, and Tesla's was crumbling. The repercussions were swift. Stock analysts downgraded Tesla's prospects, and financial media speculated on the end of its dominance. Elon Musk, known for his outspokenness, criticized the situation on social media. But this time, even his bravado couldn't soothe investors because the issue wasn't just perception, it was production. Delivery timelines slipped, battery output lagged, and assembly lines slowed. Tesla's once assured promise of innovation on demand faltered under the strain of disrupted mineral supplies. Yet, despite these visible challenges, the true damage lay concealed at the border. Behind the scenes, while attention focused on tariffs and minerals, a more insidious form of economic warfare unfolded at the Canada-US border. Mark Carney had realized that the most potent weapon wasn't tariffs, but bureaucracy. Canadian customs didn't need to violate trade laws. They simply enforced existing regulations rigorously. Auto parts shipments that once passed through swiftly were now subjected to random inspections. Truckers faced delays of 12 to 24 hours for clearance. Ports in Ontario and British Columbia quietly shifted loading priorities. Trains were held without explanation, and paperwork faced unprecedented scrutiny. Externally, it all appeared routine, but within the logistics offices of Tesla, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, the message was clear. The rules of the game had changed. Parts started showing up late. Assembly lines missed their targets. Service centers ran low on spares. Electric vehicles scheduled for April delivery were now delayed until July. Tesla's supply crisis wasn't just a company issue. It became a warning to the world. Canada wasn't just reacting. It was methodically dismantling one of the most advanced industrial ecosystems ever built, and doing so legally. The world took notice. China paid attention. Japan watched closely. Germany dispatched economic observers. This wasn't a simple trade disagreement. It was a textbook example of soft retaliation, and its shockwave reached every auto dealership across the U.S. Then came a knockout blow. Canada's new Democratic Party, energized by growing nationalist sentiment and the chaos unfolding, introduced legislation that stunned the EV world, a 100% tariff on Tesla imports, effective immediately. And that wasn't all. The bill added a $10,000 incentive for any EV built entirely within Canada. The combined impact was massive. Tesla wasn't just excluded, it was replaced. Ford, already building EVs in Ontario, saw a spike in demand. General Motors, with battery operations in Canada, became the regulatory favorite. Even Volkswagen accelerated plans for its Ontario battery plant. Tesla, once a symbol of green innovation, became an outsider, shut out of subsidies, cut off from Canadian minerals, and priced out of the market. This wasn't traditional economic policy. It was a declaration of war, not with weapons or tariffs, but with environmental nationalism. In this new game, climate goals became tools for domestic power. And Tesla, once the Green Revolution's champion, now stood isolated. Canada flipped the script. EVs weren't about saving the planet anymore. They were about protecting local jobs, fueling regional economies, and penalizing those who try to lead without cooperation. And Carney was just getting started. Mark Carney didn't get to the top by chance. Before becoming Canada's prime minister, he led two of the world's most influential central banks. He's no ordinary politician. He's a strategist. While the U.S. blustered through trade tensions, Carney moved with precision. At a global trade summit in Seoul, Carney didn't shout. He calmly positioned Canada as a beacon of stability, committed to fair trade, climate promises, and a rules-based system. And the world listened. Asia responded first. Japanese and Korean automakers, frustrated by U.S. protectionism, turned to Canada. In Europe, Carney's composed leadership stood in stark contrast to Trump's chaos. French and German officials sought alignment, not confrontation. In Latin America, Brazil and Chile opened talks with Canada about rare minerals and green tech. Canada no longer acted like a middle-tier power. It was now a central player. Media outlets began referring to this new influence as the Carney doctrine, a blend of environmental leadership, fair trade, and economic influence. While the U.S. tweeted, Carney quietly built alliances. The effects were subtle but crushing. America wasn't just being outpaced, it was being redefined. Canada was no longer the junior partner. It was the one setting the rules. The most transformative moves are often the quietest. As Washington remained distracted by internal conflict and international posturing, Canada and Mexico were quietly redrawing the continent's economic blueprint without the U.S. This wasn't theoretical. New battery facilities were breaking ground along the Ontario-Quebec corridor. EV parts hubs were emerging in Nuevo Leon and Jalisco. Japanese and Korean firms weren't waiting on American clarity. They were investing billions directly into this emerging corridor, bypassing the U.S. entirely. Shipping routes shifted. Customs systems streamlined. A new cross-border tax credit was even proposed, one that rewarded parts sourced entirely from within this new alliance. Ford expanded its Canadian operations. Hyundai doubled its logistics footprint in Mexico. Meanwhile, warehouses in Ohio and Michigan sat still, silent casualties of a power shift that few in Washington saw coming. What's unfolding isn't retribution. It's a strategic transition. U.S. automakers, once the core of North American vehicle production, now find themselves increasingly sidelined. Their exclusion isn't accidental. It's intentional. There was a time when Europe looked to America for innovation and leadership. The Made in America label once symbolized strength, advancement, and collaboration. But that reputation eroded through tariffs, labor unrest, and political instability, transforming admiration into caution. Today, Europe isn't retaliating, it's adapting. While Washington gambles with erratic economic policies, Brussels is investing in predictability. Germany canceled plans for a Volkswagen plant in Georgia, opting to build in the Netherlands. Renault is moving away from American suppliers in favor of partnerships in South Korea. The UK is quietly considering excluding American-made EVs from its climate subsidies, not out of hostility, but practicality. America's issue isn't just unreliability. It's becoming irrelevant. As one European trade official put it, we've outgrown dependency on nations that can't outgrow their internal strife. The market reflects this shift. Ford's influence is fading. GM's revival in Europe has stalled. Tesla's ad budgets are drying up in France and Germany, not out of protest, but from disinterest. The void is being filled by Hyundai, Toyota, and Chinese automakers who are stepping in with skill and focus. This isn't a breakdown. It's a transition. Europe isn't burning bridges. It's building new ones, distancing itself from a former leader that has become volatile. Where America once reigned, a new order is quietly establishing itself. While the U.S. pushes away allies and isolates its industries, China is capitalizing on the opening, and not hesitantly, but aggressively. First came a quiet deal. CATL, China's top battery company, secured long-term access to lithium and cobalt through a Canadian mining firm. Then came infrastructure. BYD, China's leading EV brand, announced a major plant in Monterrey, Mexico. Shortly after, NIO entered a joint venture with Canadian firms for battery and aluminum parts. These are not small plays. They're major moves in a global game. Even more strategically, these Chinese companies are building inside North America, taking advantage of USMCA trade benefits. Vehicles made in Canada or Mexico, even if full of Chinese parts, can avoid heavy tariffs when sold in the U.S. China didn't challenge U.S. manufacturing. It's overtaking it. Ford and GM can't compete with China's vertically integrated systems. Tesla, once dominant, is now struggling with supply issues and fading subsidies. Meanwhile, BYD debuts a $28,000 EV in Mexico and hints at entering the U.S. market. NIO is hiring engineers in Toronto, promising global expansion. American automakers, on the other hand, are laying off workers, delaying production, and begging for government help. President Trump took the stage with promises of revival. American cars made with American steel by American hands, using American resources. The message was patriotic and powerful. But behind the rhetoric lay a stark truth. America didn't have the capacity to deliver. The minerals needed for EVs, lithium, nickel, cobalt, aren't mined in sufficient quantities in the U.S. Environmental opposition and decades of offshoring gutted the mining sector. The manufacturing workforce had also vanished. Retirements, relocations, and immigration restrictions left factories without skilled labor. As the gap between ambition and capability widened, the reality set in. Factories remained idle. Equipment gathered dust. Supply chain rebuilds were postponed indefinitely. The comeback turned into a logistical disaster. National pride couldn't weld steel or refine minerals or train technicians. Press releases turned cautious. Warnings were raised. But the administration doubled down, hoping louder promises would mask the empty floors. In the end, a nation chasing revival found itself paralyzed by its own constraints. What began as rumors of delay soon escalated into widespread shutdowns. Ford halted production at multiple plants. GM cut output in Ohio and Michigan. Stellantis began large-scale layoffs, starting with contractors and growing to entire teams. Suppliers buckled under the pressure. Seat makers in Indiana, dashboard firms in Kentucky, wiring harness shops in Wisconsin, all relied on volume orders that suddenly stopped. They had no cushion. The ripple effects hit entire communities. Diners closed. Family-run tool shops shut down. Cities like Flint, Toledo, and Dayton, once promised rebirth through tariffs, fell back into despair. The damage wasn't just financial, it was emotional. These plants weren't just jobs. They were identity, legacy, and hope. Now, they're hollow reminders of a dream that couldn't be delivered. The downfall of America's auto industry didn't come from foreign rivals. It was crushed by unrealistic expectations, by a patriotic vision built on shaky ground. A mandate made in speeches, not supported by infrastructure or reality. And when that illusion collapsed, so did the political loyalty of those who once believed in it. It all began with one video that went viral, a laid-off welder in Michigan, standing outside a shuttered factory, holding a MAGA hat and asking, "Where's my job now, Mr. President?" That moment struck a nerve. Across the industrial heartland, frustration turned into a movement. Online communities once filled with pro-Trump content shifted into spaces for airing economic pain. Facebook groups became forums for disillusionment. Reddit threads overflowed with photos of eviction notices, repossessed trucks, and pink slips. These weren't activists. They were workers, welders, truckers, machinists. And they were angry. They had stood by the tariffs. They had championed America first. They voted for a dream, even when it meant economic sacrifice. They thought loyalty would bring jobs, fair wages, and restored pride. Instead, they were left with silence and shutdowns. The betrayal didn't come from China or Mexico. It came from the man they trusted to fix everything. Or once rallies became angry protests, applause turned to accusations. Former supporters showed up at town halls demanding answers. Conservative talk shows cracked under the pressure. Right-wing pundits began expressing doubt. Republican politicians in battleground states started backing away, worried about the fallout. The GOP base wasn't just splintering, it was exploding. Trump had once lit a fire in working-class America. Now that fire was burning him. And while the political base crumbled, a far greater threat emerged from America's closest ally, Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney didn't need to make threats. A single, carefully worded statement about re-evaluating energy export policies sent financial markets into panic. Canada, the largest foreign oil supplier to the U.S., also powers much of the Northeast through hydroelectric exports. And suddenly, the illusion of American energy independence was shattered. Gas prices surged, up 70 cents in under 2 weeks. Blackouts rippled through the Midwest as grid systems faltered. Governors rushed to calm their citizens while quietly appealing to Ottawa for stability. Carney said nothing more. He didn't have to. The message was crystal clear. Canada didn't need to cut off energy supplies. The mere possibility was enough to show how vulnerable the U.S. really is. Wall Street began quietly slashing forecasts. Energy companies shelved growth initiatives. Investors went from bullish to bracing. But in Washington, there was no contingency plan, no rescue package, no roadmap. The collapse wasn't just industrial, it was psychological. The American machine didn't merely run out of fuel. It lost faith in itself. And in that vacuum, the consequences hit hardest where they always do, at the bottom. Across the country, car dealerships no longer buzz with anticipation. They echo. Once symbols of prosperity and choice, they're now tombs. Half-lit showrooms stocked with unsold inventory and visited by increasingly few. What used to be a hallmark of adulthood, buying your first new car, is now, for many, financially out of reach. Ownership costs have exploded. The used market, once a lifeline for working-class families, is in chaos. That 10-year-old pickup with rusted fenders? It's a hot commodity now because it runs. A 5-year-old sedan that once sold for $15,000 is now priced north of $25,000. And it doesn't stop with the sticker price. Simple maintenance has become a luxury. An alternator swap that used to cost $300 now comes with an $850 bill, assuming you can find the parts or a mechanic with time. Even oil changes have doubled. Insurance premiums are climbing too, following the inflation of car values and the cost of replacement parts. Every scratch, every fender bender, now threatens to derail a household budget. Electric vehicles? They're growing, but out of reach. Tesla's entry-level models top $40,000. Charging infrastructure is patchy at best, especially outside of cities. In rural America, EVs are more fantasy than future. The infrastructure just isn't there, and neither is the trust. This isn't just a transportation issue. It's a cultural fracture. For generations, the car symbolized American independence, freedom, identity. Now, families delay, downsize, or opt out entirely. Rideshare sign-ups soar. Used bikes are flying off Craigslist. The road trip dream is becoming a memory. And the people who used to build that dream, they're disappearing too. The factories didn't stop because no one wanted the product. They stopped because no one could make it. For decades, America neglected its trades. High school shop classes were gutted. Vocational careers, welding, machining, diagnostics, were dismissed as Plan B paths for the non-academic. Four-year college became the gospel. But now, the country is paying the price for that arrogance. The average age of skilled workers has crossed 50. Retirements are outpacing recruitment. Harsh immigration crackdowns have cut off a vital pipeline of foreign-born labor that once filled gaps. Apprenticeships remain underfunded and undersold. Trade schools, where they exist, cost nearly as much as universities, minus the prestige, scholarships, or support systems. The result? A nation that can no longer service itself. Broken EVs sit in lots with no qualified technicians to repair them. Assembly lines freeze for electricians, millwrights, and toolmakers. Construction sites delay not for materials, but for manpower. This shortage touches everything: infrastructure, energy, agriculture. It's not a flash crash. It's a slow suffocation, unfolding one retirement, one vacancy at a time. The talent is there, but it's aging, leaving, or already gone. And just when America needs it most, it finds itself empty-handed. As the United States stalls, Japan and South Korea move forward, with calm efficiency, not fanfare. Toyota is growing its footprint in Kentucky and Texas. Hyundai and Kia are expanding in Alabama and Georgia. These companies hire locally. They build on time. They don't fight with unions on camera or hold supply chains hostage to political whims. They just work. And American consumers are noticing. Legacy U.S. automakers, Ford, GM, Stellantis, are riddled with delays, recalls, and instability. Meanwhile, Japanese and Korean brands deliver. Dealers are shifting their loyalty. Imports are starting to feel more American than the domestics. They create jobs, build reliable vehicles, and avoid the drama. This isn't some hostile takeover. It's something quieter and far more permanent. A peaceful handover of consumer trust. American automakers are losing not just sales, but allegiance. And with each passing quarter, the question is no longer if the U.S. can catch up, but if it ever will. There was a time when Detroit ruled the world, when Made in America meant craftsmanship, pride, and power. When the rumble of a V8 engine was the sound of national confidence. But that time is fading into the rearview mirror. Today, the global auto landscape is shifting, and the U.S. is no longer the gravitational center. Europe is circling the wagons around its own industries. China is dominating EV manufacturing. Japan and South Korea are owning the middle and premium segments. India is rising fast. And then there's Canada, once humble,